right, I guess we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Omalanik, and I'm the Network Engagement Manager here at the Children in Nature Network. I am glad you're all here. Welcome to our Families Together in Nature kickoff event. The goal of Families Together in Nature is to provide both inspiration and practical tips for getting more outdoor activities onto the family calendar and more of nature's benefits into the lives of children. Throughout this year, we'll be offering Families Together in Nature events, resources, the Vitamin N Challenge, and highlighting family programs and leaders in the Children in Nature movement. I am joining you today from the land of the Munsee Lenape people. We invite you to share the Indigenous land history of your location in the chat. If you are not familiar with the history of your location, you can learn about Indigenous territories and lands with Native Land Map. We'll share that in the chat now. And here are some other ways that you can support Indigenous peoples every day. Learning, educating, advocating, following, and supporting. I'll just take a minute to share some other event logistics. Closed captioning has been enabled. Please use the Q&A webinar Zoom function for any questions for the panelists. We'll be addressing those at the end. And the chat is enabled for all attendees. I see many of you are chiming in and commenting, so thank you for utilizing that. This webinar will also be recorded. About 2 weeks after the event, it will be emailed out to all event attendees who registered for the event, and it will also be available on our website. All right, now that all of that is taken care of, it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our panelists. We have Nicole Jackson. Nicole is an environmental educator and founder of Her Nature LLC, a life coaching business focused on nature therapy for Black women. She is also a birder, co-organizer of Black Birders Week, and a Children in Nature Network Legacy Camp alumna. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole. We also have Kari Kleven. Kari is a licensed clinical social worker who runs Minneapolis Nature-Based Therapy, a practice that offers psychotherapy to people of all ages outside in natural settings, working with nature as a therapeutic partner. Before starting this practice in 2021, Kari was a therapist and supervisor at Washburn Center for Children for many years. So happy to have you here today, Kari. Sonny LaForm is a Yakima Fields Office Director with Casey Family Programs. Sonny is certified phase 2 in the neurosequential model and has collaborated in the development and implementation of trauma and healing informed care training. Sonny has been a staunch advocate of the powerful benefits of connecting to nature and has partnered in the purposefully collaborative efforts between Children in Nature Network and Casey Family Programs. So glad you could join us today, Sonny. And we have Renā Trujillo. Renā identifies as a queer, multiracial, detribalized, and reconnecting Indigenous human. She graduated from Colorado State University with her Bachelor's of Art in Ethnic Studies and a minor in Women's Studies. Recently, Renā has been building knowledge and skills directly related to environmental justice by attending and mentoring nonviolent direct action camps and Indigenous science, technology, and resilience camps led by Indigenous peoples and Indigenous-led organizations. Thank you so much for being here today, Renā. Okay, so we're here today to talk about self-care in nature, but before we get started, Nicole is going to lead us in a self-care practice.
Thank you, Christy, for the introduction, and welcome everyone in the chat. and seeing a lot of different places that people are viewing from, which is great. I am based in Columbus, Ohio, native lands of the Shawnee and Miami. So I'm excited to be here and have this kickoff activity for you all. And hopefully you can use it even after today's program. So thinking about self-care practices and activities, this is something I do frequently to feel more connected, to reduce my stress. increase my curiosity of the natural world. So I literally always focus on my senses. So my 5 senses, smell, touch, taste, hearing, and really like kind of zoning in on those 5 senses, but also using them to kind of reflect, but also be with myself and hopefully connect to others, community, and more of the natural world around me. So I'm going to kind of pace a little bit through each of these. If you want to either close your eyes, keep them open, but we're going to be using our mind a little bit and being thoughtful and kind of making mental notes of how we can best practice self-care using those 5 senses. So I want to start with the first one being sight. And again, just going back to 5 senses and how we kind of engage. It's all going to look different for everybody. So within this, I hope that you can disconnect from judgment and criticizing yourself and how you do things and really embrace just being self-aware. So even if not so good things are popping up, I think just having that awareness of where those feelings, emotions are coming up is more than enough for this activity. So with the first one, I'm going to talk about sight. So I think about sight and when I do my nature walks and really thinking about what I'm seeing and what it makes me feel and the memories that it brings. So if you were to go on a nature walk or if you were to go out to a place in nature, what do you usually see? And this could be just a simple nature walk, or if you're not close to the outdoors and you're inside, what would you see that's surrounding you that makes you feel good? So for me, it's books. When I see books, I think of reading, I think of an extension of knowledge, an extension of wisdom that I can connect to. And even if I don't have an opportunity to go outside, there's always picture books, there's always poetry, there's always readings that can connect me to the outside world. So if you can think of a few things that are next to you or in front of you, even the light from the window. I love that when the sun comes up. That's a beautiful time to really feel one and connect with nature. The second one I want to go over is smell. What comes to mind with different smells? I feel like, again, this is another opportunity to connect to the present, but also to the past. I always think of childhood memories with food, essential oils. Food is a big thing for me. So I always think of food that my mom used to make. With my siblings and I have 10 siblings, so my mom had to make a lot of food. But knowing that I could get ready to help her when she needed certain ingredients or to set the table, it's very nostalgic. So having, spices, against essential oils, candles even, I think is an opportunity for us to connect back to the past in a happy place from our childhood. When I think of smells in nature, I think of like a crisp spring day. That's very inviting, just knowing that a new season is right around the corner. I love the smell of, I don't know if anybody else does, but like when people are putting out like, what am I thinking of? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Planting flowers, like wildflowers and like catalpa trees. Like there's specific smells that come to mind when I'm out on my nature walks or at the park. There's flowers, there's trees, things that are blooming, the wind catching things in the air, like those again bring nostalgic memories to me. So nature is a really awesome opportunity to connect with self and memories, but also kind of give you this like inside world into not our everyday smells that we, would experience indoors. So if you're indoors, you may have candles. I have an eye mask with scented with lavender. I love that. It smells awesome. Sometimes I'll use incense. So there's natural smells and there's more non-natural smells, but I think it's still an opportunity to really have us focus on ourselves and connect with the world around us and with other people. The third one is sound. When you think of a sound that makes you boosts your mood or gives you this just like happy feeling. If you want to share any of the ones that I've gone over so far in the chat, that would be great. I would love to see some of those answers. I instantly think of with sounds, music therapy. So sometimes when I'm out in nature and I'm walking on a trail, I'll combine, I guess, my nature walks with music. There is this kind of expression, there's this expression called, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name. Kama Muta, so not Kama Sutra, but Kama Muta, M-U-T-A. And it's a Sanskrit expression that means moved by love. So I'm very much one of those people who really like sad songs, but I don't feel sad. I feel more nostalgic and connected when I'm in those spaces. So I usually will pair my opportunities to go out in nature with music. And sometimes that'll take me back to a moment of my childhood, a moment with a loved one, a memory of a loved one. And that's creating that emotion. You get goosebumps, or you feel really elated, or brought to tears. It's moving you in a hopeful and kind of meaningful way. So I love to experience that when I'm out in nature. So music can definitely do that. Nature can do that. I'm a bird watcher, so I love the sounds of birds, any season. Hopefully they're not too noisy. But like blue jays are one of those birds that just, they can be really loud, but they're really beautiful to look at. So it depends on the time of the year. But I feel like having those nature sounds like crinkling leaves in the summertime. Oh my goodness, I love the sound of cottonwood trees blowing in the wind. It sounds like the ocean to me. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but it's the most beautiful sound. I can sit in the grass and listen to that forever. The next one I want to go over is taste. So again, going back to food, going back to like the winter, like when you're making hot chocolate or tea, those are nostalgic moments. If you have food that connects you to your culture, connects you to language, I feel like those are really opportunities to connect again with nature and where those foods come from, how they grow, how they're able to create opportunities for us to connect with each other on a social level. I feel like I repeated one, but I may not have. Am I good with the 4 so far? Okay. The last one is touch. Touch is something I feel like with this past few years, it's been a difficult ride just because of COVID and the pandemic and not being able to be as close with our loved ones. So I've had to find a lot of replacements for that. Not being able to hug loved ones as much was something that I didn't even think about until COVID happened, of how important touch from another human being was. So thinking about those layers when you're at home and you want to get in a cozy space, I like fuzzy socks. I actually still have a lot of like teddy bears from my childhood. When I need to find moments to, when I'm anxious or depressed or I'm having a hard time sleeping, I'll grab one of those. That'll help me sleep. When I'm out in nature, sometimes I like to take my shoes off, walk in the grass, put my feet in the soil. It's very grounding. It's very soothing. And I think having that touch with another person, again, just is another way to help you feel connected to other people. into self, and to know that you're nourishing yourself, you're nurturing yourself through touch. And it's a good practice to help you notice the tension in your body, whether you feel it in your shoulders, in your arms, your legs, especially from a long day of work, your eyes from looking at a screen. I think these are all good opportunities to kind of just check in with your body physically, but also emotionally, spiritually, mentally. So hopefully you can take some of those reflections, things that you've shared, and practice more of that as the days go on, as the weeks, months. And it's good opportunity to another activity, self-care activity is journaling. So if you're experiencing or reflecting on any of these activities using your senses, it's good to write it down and even go back to them later to see if they've changed or if they've stayed the same, and how it's kind of giving you a little bit more to challenge yourself with moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That was amazing. I've never thought about how nature and being in nature grounds me in the present while also connecting me to past memories. So thank you for making that connection. I've never thought about that, but it's definitely the case. I also, apologies, my nature is laying on the floor next to me. So if you hear light snoring, I promise it is not me. So, all right, great. Let's get started. So, self-care means so many different things to different people. And, self-care, many people do it inside, but why practice self-care in nature? Why leave your house? Why go to the yard, go to the porch? What is the, what is the value in taking your self-care routines and practices and doing them outside in nature? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in. So this is Sonny, and again, I'm coming from the land of the Yakima, recognizing the Confederate tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. I first want to express my gratitude for the panelists, as well as Nicole leading us through that sensory activity. That was amazing. It's one of those examples of just your setting intentions and having body awareness, and really appreciate that. And it's something that we encourage not just ourselves as practitioners, but also our families and youth that we work with. And so, I want to express my gratitude again for being part of this panelist, and sharing in this conversation, and being able to speak to the purposeful work in Nature as Healer. And it really reflects our values as a KC family organization. I also wanted to again say a little about KC Family Programs, and we're a private operating foundation with focus on consulting and public policy research and our direct services. And I'm part of our direct services office in Yakima, one of many other offices across the nation. And really our focus is on safely reducing the need for foster care in the United States. Our office and other offices focus on collaborating with the local jurisdictions and to helping to improve the overall health and well-being and achieve permanency for children that have been impacted by the child welfare system. And many of them have experienced complex traumas and systemic traumas and other adverse experiences, and that really highlights the importance of the Nature as Healer work, or connecting to nature. We also take a trauma healing informed care approach with a very diversity and equity and inclusion lens, and really emphasized on culture and connections. And as many of you know, there's a movement towards this connection to nature and how important that is, and the healing power of nature. And it really helps to support our mental health, or enhances mood and self-regulation. And this is helpful for those that have these physical and emotional challenges resulting from adverse childhood experiences. Even those short doses of being in nature helps to buffer that stress activation. And it's all about being the calmest central nervous system in the room. And it's something that we say as practitioners, really about ultimately being able to calm others and have that co-regulation that happens. And, aside from the physiological benefits of being in nature, as Nicole spoke about, and it's that self-awareness, and that it promotes that sense of being and worth, and allows for time for self-reflection and self-awareness to oneself and surroundings. It does come back to something that may have been lost as far as our spiritual awareness, and that I feel is very powerful and transformative. But I'll pause there and let others jump in.
I'd love to jump in just to piggyback on some of what you both said, because I resonated a lot with it related to the work I do with parents and kids outside in nature. I will first say I'm Kari, where I live and work in Minneapolis, Minnesota is the traditional homeland of the Dakota people. Minneapolis means the village of many lakes. And I noticed in the chat when you were leading us, Nicole, that there were lots of people who were saying the sound of water, how important that is. And we have a lot of water in our city. I'm blessed with that. No ocean, but a lot of like beautiful, beautiful lakes and creeks. And that's where I do a lot of my work, really encouraging parents to get outside with their kids. Parents come to me, because their kids are struggling, or they are struggling with how to support their kids through some really hard things, whether it's anxiety or depression, trauma, just like stress from the pace of everyday life, or from the things happening around them, in Minneapolis where George Floyd was killed, and so many other places in the country. I have a lot of families coming and saying, we are carrying too much stress. We need some help, and self-care out in nature. I really believe, as you were saying, Sonny, that it like connects us to some really important resources. And I noticed in the chat, and also what you were saying, Sonny, about, the nervous system. That's what I talk with parents about a lot. Like, one of the most important things that you can do is to calm your own nervous system with your kids, because we know how our systems resonate with each other. And when we're talking about how do we support our children, like for, to be healthy and be able to play and go to school and feel good about themselves and be resilient, a lot of it is how we can calm our own selves to be there for them. And nature provides so many ways to do that. As you were showing us, Nicole, like we can use the support to calm ourselves into the present moment and then be there for our kids. So when parents say to me, like, what do I do outside with our, what do I do outside with them? Like, what makes it good? I think it's kind of like, how do you be? You can step outside your door and do anything, any place. I don't want to talk too long, but I'll share a quick story from a client just last week, the mom of a 1-year-old who came to visit me, to see me for a session. And the first thing she said is, I finally got outside with her yesterday. We'd had such a hard week. She'd been really sick. We'd been inside. I'm doing it all by myself. I just felt like I was going crazy. And she said, it was so hard to do. Like every piece of outdoor, it's winter now in Minnesota, we have snow, ice. Every piece of outdoor gear I brought her, she threw, but I kept at it. And then I finally, she wanted to go in the stroller, which was stupid because there's snow and ice outside. Like strollers do not work well in Minneapolis at this time. I said yes. We got outside. We pushed just a little way. I pushed her just a little ways. And then, do you know what happened? Like she saw dog pee on the side of on the snow. From there, we spent an hour finding dog pee in the 3 blocks around our house. She asked all kinds of questions about it. And we were outside for that whole time. She was, running around. I think she's about 1.5 years. And she said, we got inside. She took a nap and I got a shower. And I felt like I was a new person. And she said to me, and I was not prompting her saying, I have this webinar to go to. She was just saying every time I think it's not going to be worth it and I get myself out there, it is. And she followed her daughter's lead, which I think is one of the most important things to be able to do for our children when we get out. kind of let go of our own agenda, settle in, see what they are drawn to, allow them to get in a flow of what they see around them and just be there with them. I think that's that's healing in of itself, just that kind of being together and being with nature.
This is getting me so excited. Thanks to everybody who shared, even in the chat. It's really fun to read your contributions as well, and just see what you're thinking about as we share these things. So why outside? And also, just like before I start, also my name's Renā Trujillo. I don't know about you all, but like ever since coronavirus came to be, I feel like self-care has really kind of been like trending, or like it's like over sensationalized in a way. And it's like you can see how differently it takes like shape and form based across like class lines, wealth lines, race lines, like gender, all these things. And so I think going back to this point of being and like how you're being, how one is being, it makes me think a lot about like, you know, are we asking ourselves those critical questions of like, you know, am I actually doing this out of practice, or this practice out of like self-care, or is this like what capitalists, like colonial, like ways of being have taught me that I should be, you know, treating myself and caring for myself? But that looks very different based on, you know, the body that you're born into and the abilities that you have or may develop throughout life. And so, and like that's always changing, you know, our needs are always changing, our strengths are always changing, we're constantly evolving, and that, you know, change is kind of the only constant. So just thinking about how we can choose to show up to respond, you know what I'm saying? And like not to minimize either this, like what I appreciate what's been named is like a lot of these things are systemic, institutional, and like I remember having this epiphany of being like, you know, if I don't care for myself, like through my diet, getting outside, exercising, like meditating, like doing breath work, I'm gonna die like a premature death. And, you know, that's assuming that like all these things go well and like life doesn't happen in the random ways that it does. But just like the fact that like the system still wins, you know, like it still wins because like essentially like did the job for the system, you know what I mean? Because I'm like not caring for myself, or not like eating well, or it also like impacts my ability to show up for like myself, my family, my community. So I think that like realizing that self-care is a practice, and you know, it shouldn't be only the tools shouldn't be reached for only when you're at a point of crises, right? Like preventative action and care feels really important to me. Something that I was thinking about too is like, what if you live in an industrial like waste zone? How do we say like go outside and this is what you should do to care for yourself? Like when, you know, the air quality index is really high because like there's a lot of fracking or something like that, right? Like, so I think that another thing too is just like really being curious about what the sources of unwellness are in the community, so that you could have your own solutions for what looks best for you and your region, and your local ecosystem and environment, economy, etc. It also made me think a lot about reservations. So I live in northern Colorado, and I live on the east side of the Rocky Mountains. And this past weekend, I just traveled to New Mexico, Vanderwagen and Gallup, and drove through and past a lot of reservations. And I was like thinking about it. I was just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to like, you know, push Indigenous peoples to lands that are not as abundant in resource, right? So also thinking about those things, just kind of like the situations that we're born into, how race impacts our experience and the kinds of things that we may do to care for ourselves. It also makes me think about the first year that I was participating as a mentor in the iStar Native Youth Camp. COVID hit and we had to move virtual an entire camp and just be like, hey, we're only 2 months in and we're just gonna ride this. We're gonna make like baskets and put whatever materials that we want the students and families to like engage with, and also just recognizing that there's, you know, disproportionate impact that something like coronavirus has had on Indigenous, tribal, First Nations, Aboriginal communities. So anyways, but still making that fun and being able to connect with youth virtually. And the youngest participant was like 6 years old and the eldest was 15. And some of the things that we did to just like be creative with each other were like, you know, asking the youth if there's something in their house that, you know, represents their culture or a memory that makes them proud to like be who they are and come introduce it, you know, as they introduce themselves, or encouraging the youth to identify an elder and like call them and do like conduct an interview, or asking the youth to go take like a neighborhood walk and draw, you know, 3 species interactions that they see, you know, a ladybug walking up a plant, the different stages of the larvae, you know, the sun and the wind, and thinking of those elements too as spiritual, you know, they all have spirits, and not separating ourselves from the land, because as Indigenous peoples, the land gives us our identity, and it reminds us who we are, and it, you know, contains our original instructions, and so I think I will tidy it all up with, from my perspective, like healing the land is healing ourselves. So that is why you should self-care in nature and with nature.
Am I okay to go, or are we, sorry, I didn't want to take up any time. If you want to move to the next question, feel free, sorry.
No, you're good. I just wanted to chime in and say thanks so much, Renee, for sharing all that with us. It was really very powerful. What were you going to add in, Nicole?
Yeah, so all of what Renee was saying, hard to talk like in depth these types of settings, because I'm literally that person who's just like, let's have a talk show, but we can't do that. So but a lot of what Renee was saying resonated with me, and what Sonny and Kari were saying, like, there's so many layers. So even my experience growing up, actually my connection with nature, my relationship with nature developed out of trauma. So I was actually in foster care when I was really, really young, 4, 5, 6 years old, with an older sibling. And unfortunately, we were abused while in foster care. So nature was my go-to for figuring out my life, essentially, and realizing how much of an adult I had to become in that space of trauma to take care of myself, because there were no resources to help me, you know, even like have the conversation of like, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? But nature just gave me a space to feel all of the emotions, every single emotion. And I grew up in inner city Cleveland. So in a really, you know, even in foster care, it was in a really nice neighborhood, really nice schools, you know, neighbors, all of that. But, you know, the stuff behind the scenes, behind, you know, that nobody knew about, terrible things were happening. And realizing, you know, the backyard was the start of that, of like going out and knowing, you know, that there's trees, there's not even birds, because I didn't even learn about birds until college, but just like green space, enough green space, patches of green space where I could detach from what I was going through on a regular basis. I distinctly remember, because a lot of my memories, just because of trauma, aren't there. Like there's so much stuff I don't remember from my childhood. And then there's other things that I remember vividly. And one of those was on the side of the house, you know, there's flowers growing, plants growing. And I remember finding this, it was a piece of plastic essentially, but it looked like a seed to me. And I planted it. Like I dug the hole and everything. I planted it and I stood there for like 5, maybe, I don't know. It seemed like a long time. It's probably a short time. And I was hoping for it to grow. Like I told myself, like, I'm going to come back and see if anything, like to even know that, to do that, I don't know, at my age, like even in that really stressful, traumatic situation I was going through in foster care, I still had hope. And nature gave me that hope that what I was going through was temporary. But I could use that as an opportunity to uplift myself and to see a whole different world that I wasn't expecting as I got older. So I was just really grateful for that, the relationship that I have and like how it's evolved, but also using that, what Renee was saying, like you're creating this toolbox essentially to help you get through those moments, those hurdles. And it shouldn't just be kind of like a snapshot moment, but you're using it for the rest of your life. And I learned so many lessons about myself being in nature by myself, like, you know, how to be more confident, how to be more self-aware, how to be more patient with myself. Because it's a lot of anger, a lot of waiting for things to happen, good things to happen, because I always just felt like bad thing after bad thing after bad thing would happen in the trauma. And when good things would start to happen, I would even doubt that, of like, oh, something's wrong here. This doesn't feel right, because I was so used to the bad. And then I had a moment of just clarity of like, nature was this person that was telling me like, everything's going to be okay. You can feel whatever you need to feel. You can be here. You don't have to hide yourself. And I'm going to help you through it. I'm going to take you through those steps of feeling whole again and feeling a sense of like I had a purpose to do something, even though I didn't know what that was. It was just more of like, I'm going to help you get through the trauma so you can get back to living. So that was so comforting to me, and realizing how much that helped me speak up for myself, because I was so quiet. I was so reserved. I didn't like people. I was just like, people are going to constantly hurt me, manipulate me, all those things. And nature just gave me a voice to speak out about being introverted, you know, liking nature, liking science, loving the outdoors. I felt safer in the outdoors than I did with people. So there's so many layers that I feel like I always come back to, of how much I've grown, but also with trauma, it goes into the rest, like you're taking it with you the rest of your life, but it's just the moments of what you're putting in your toolbox to make it easier to get through those troubled moments. So I'm very grateful that I have this relationship with nature, and I'm not, you know, like nature is this thing over here that I don't need to pay attention to, but like it's with me all the time, and I can always go to it when I'm feeling not my best. And with the coaching that I'm doing, that's something that I want to give to Black women, especially when it comes to toxic stress and being in spaces where you don't feel included. You feel like you're doing everything for everybody else except for yourself. I want to be able to help them create those toolboxes for themselves to get through the hurdles in life.
Could I jump in there? Nicole, I appreciate your sharing of your lived experience. I think that's so powerful. And it's a prime example of that healing and resilience and hope. You mentioned hope that comes out of that connection to nature. And I think for me, it resonates that for us as practitioners, it's so important to have that compassion and acknowledging of trauma and its impact. And we strive in our work to really partner with youth and families on this journey, on their journey, and become with humility and understanding, and that the families and individuals are the true experts in their healing. And we have to walk alongside and help to encourage what they need. And oftentimes that connection to nature in that journey is so powerful.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal story, Nicole. I could see in the chat that many people are appreciative and have gotten a lot from your message. One of the notes I took, Renee mentioned that many people can't go outside because of unsafe conditions or physical limitations, or maybe weather, or children are too small, or pollution. There's just sometimes you just can't get out there. So for whatever reason, if you're unable to go outside, how do you suggest that someone is still able to reap the benefits of nature without actually maybe being in nature?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is going back to our introduction practice, just like around engaging our 5 senses. And I think that that could be a good place to start. I recently went to a home with a beautiful fireplace in the center of it. And I just thought about how much I love building fires, and just understanding fire as a spiritual element and very powerful. And so obviously safely, I'm not saying to go start a bunch of fires. But I think that just looking around and seeing what you already have in abundance, and just choosing to go in those same veins, and branch out from there. And also just acknowledging, becoming self-aware of what it is that either triggers you into that state, or of being unwell, or the opposite end of that, what triggers you into feeling pleasant and joyful. And so I love taking care of my plants. So I'll sometimes just turn my whole kitchen, it's the only place that doesn't have carpet, into just a repotting station on a really beautiful day. And yeah, I don't know, just trying to live life with the seasons, you know what I'm saying? And whatever makes sense to me, that is accessible within reach. And just a minimum of 10 minutes a day, I think.
I can add on to that with what you said there, Renee, about actually, what is it now that I'm, or just that what's something that makes you feel better? What helps you to feel calm? And it made me think of a 12-year-old girl that that I met with earlier this week, who came to me because she was having a lot of intrusive thoughts that are really scary to her. And when we were doing a safe place exercise, she talked about a place that she had been before, by a lake, up north, where she was at a camp, and how there is a place, when she thinks about it, her, the thoughts, she said, the thoughts are there, but I don't have to believe them. She just, she feels like she's got support, and she can't always go out. I mean, I did say to her mom, anytime you can get her, if she's feeling stressed, and I kind of say this here because part of what I do, I mean, I don't train parents to be, or caregivers to be therapists, because that's not their role. You have the most important role as a parent, but you can do things that can really be supportive, as I know all parents are trying to do with your children's mental health. And so in this case, it's okay, take her out, when she can't think of it because she's too scared, say, maybe can we get in the car and go to the drive to the lake, or get some music, you know, like the sound of water that is really calming for her. And I know with other people that I've worked with, you know, it's trees. Like, what is something to what you said, Nicole, about like storytelling? Like, I work a lot with like encouraging parents to tell stories to their kids about outside. That's like sort of sharing the why. Like, why does it feel good to be outside? You know, like for me, I could say being in the sunshine reminds me of my grandma, because she was a dear person to me, and I can just picture her. And I have a few photographs of her like this, with her face up to the sun. And so that really, like that, even when I say it right there, I can feel, like you were talking about, Nicole, like I can feel like kind of a tingling and a settling.
The
in my
kama
body.
mudra is, it's
And that's
connecting you
important
with,
stuff.
making you one with,
Yes. So anything that helps bring us there. You know, I had a mom who, when we'd get out and she was stressed and we were trying to settle in to the like walk, the nature walk, I watched her and she would go over and like touch a particular tree. And I asked her about it, and her child was there, and she started telling stories about like the place where she lived. She grew up in Mexico, and she was talking about like her mom and trees. And so all of that is, just so healing and connecting, and ways that we can bring that into our lives, even when we can't always get outside to the forest or the lakes.
You know, Kari, that really resonates with me. I think of this quote around, when children come into contact with nature, they reveal their strengths. And I love the idea of just, bringing nature indoors when we're not accessible to camping or trails. And in our work and our collaborative work with the Children Nature Network, we're very mindful around accessibility and families to green spaces. And what you mentioned as far as plants and sensory gardens, things that you can do indoors, and or even if it's just in the backyard or looking out the window, the power of the mind and imagination around those things. I think of some of my colleagues have shared work with families where they're not as comfortable or feel safe in certain settings in the outdoors, and despite this, they're going out of their comfort zone because for their children it makes them feel free and happy, and there's joy and hope with it. And one of my colleagues shared of a grandmother who again set an expectation that was minimal, that the kid would be outdoors and outside for at least 1 hour a day, and that was something that was so powerful and important to her. And so I think it's about the intentionality of being mindful of the accessibility and barriers, and when we're working as practitioners with our youth and families, and really to help mitigate those, and really again emphasize the power of nature and the connection for these families.
Yeah, I would say for me it's again, going back to the toolbox example, I didn't realize I've been doing this for myself for some time. But going back to that and just having nature as this entity that's helping me express my emotions, because a lot of it growing up was just like, I don't want to talk about anything. I'm so angry. I don't know what to do with these emotions. I don't want to talk about it. Just leave me alone. And then being in nature, whether I was inside or outside, but having those memories and those moments to even go back to, like, when I would take trips, or when I would go to a park, even if it, was a small pocket park in the neighborhood, and I was not feeling my best, I can always go back to that memory of like, I love just sitting in the grass or watching my siblings, play on the swings, or those things I could always just think back to and be like, oh my goodness, I feel so much better, versus being stuck in that cycle of negativity. So it really just helped me just have an opportunity to share with other people what I was feeling and why I was feeling it. So I feel like we don't have a lot of those opportunities to really express what we're feeling without criticizing ourselves at the same time, and comparing ourselves to other people's experiences. So like, for instance, I'm obsessed with the moon. And like, I document on my calendar when the moon is, the full moon is gonna, so I like have something to look forward to, even though I'm just looking out my window. And I have these conversations with the moon, and I'm like, could see it shine through my window, and I'm literally having a conversation like, hi moon, you're so beautiful, thank you for showing yourself. Like, those things just give me so much more connection to the earth and to the world outside of myself, especially when I'm in my head. And sometimes, as far as like getting out to get in, I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like I need to get out to get in. Nature helps me do that, whether I'm looking out the window at the moon or feeling the sun through the window, or even taking care of plants. It's distracting me from those negative thoughts and those anxious moments. And it's like an instant, oh, I'm fine. Like, I don't know why I was so like, just in despair, but as soon as I make that connection in that way, it just all just dissipates.
And I hope that parents share all that stuff out loud with their kids. That's kind of like the why. Like,
yes.
Like,
and I think that's the part too that we need to embrace, that it's a practice and that it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think get into that rhythm of finding your voice through the practice of knowing that like you want it, like you're in teacher mode with kids, with youth all the time, or you're in adult mode. And they're not going to express things the way that adults do. So like even then you have to pace yourself in how you have to kind of change your communication or just be there to listen, to be able to say, okay, there's nothing wrong with the situation. It's just adjusting and pivoting to make for a better opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah, Nicole, that's so important. I feel that resonates with me. I think when we think about how we show up for ourselves and then how we show up for the youth and families that we're working with that may have had experiences with trauma or adverse childhood experiences. And as practitioners, it's our own regulation in those outdoor spaces that's so important. It allows us that piece of calm and to be present in the healing work, together. And it's just so important in the work that we do. And, I think of my own personal journey as well, too. And you mentioned, our families and parents, and I probably should share some of my own personal experience. My mom's probably on the webinar too, so otherwise she might get upset that I don't mention that. But my own experiences has been around, the power of nature and connection. And having grown up in Hawaii, I had the opportunity to really have some great outdoor space. So when you talk about those nostalgic memories of sound and senses, and I think of the ocean and surfing and camping and running around and just having opportunity to again have joy and hope and really about caring for my mind and my body and my soul. And that transition to my adulthood and work and my personal life, and so important as far as that connection to nature for myself, and really thinking about even the psychological impacts of stress and how beneficial it is to be out in nature. And so I appreciate everyone's sharing, and I'm seeing so much in the chat around ways to be really intentional about the work that we do and how important it is to, again, connect to nature.
I just wanted to mention that there are several questions in the chat about how teachers can feel more comfortable outdoors or bringing learning outside. And I was thinking that many of the, solutions that you've named can also apply to school teachers and the classroom setting. I was also thinking about just taking baby steps and starting small. In a former life, I was an elementary art teacher myself, and just bringing nature inside, you know, that's something you can do in the classroom. It's something you can do in your home. I'm looking around, I have like seashells over here. I have like a rock over here, you know, mostly presents from my children. Even just looking outside of a window or writing a poem or drawing a picture about an element of nature, you know, just, you know, I think it was also mentioned in the chat, I think a lot of times we tend to just overcomplicate. It's like, you know, if I'm going to practice self-care in nature, I need to, you know, buy 7 things, capitalism. I need to like take the day off of work. I need to do X, Y, and Z. When it, you know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Also in the chat, several people were naming resources for viewing nature on the computer, listening to nature on different apps, which is also a great idea I never thought of. I'm so sad that we are nearing the end of our conversation. There was one question in the Q&A that I just wanted to mention before we wrap up, and that question is addressed to Nicole. Lara writes, Nicole, thank you again for your courage and sharing. What things made it possible for you to connect with nature during your early years? If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Say my sense of wonder and curiosity. Again, it was a very confusing time for me because I was taken away from my mom overnight, along with 5 other of my siblings, and trying to process that and not knowing when I would be back with my mom, along with my other siblings. Just again, very traumatic situation, but I don't know, like planting that seed did fake seed. It wasn't even, I don't know, it did something for me. And then education was another part of it, knowing that I could go, like going to school even, and seeing that there's a whole other world out there for me to explore. So I just became obsessed with learning about the natural world. So it was very much therapy. It started out as therapy for me, nature, and then it became this exploration, you know, journey of, you know, learning about animals, learning about plants, and what it was doing for my brain, and like creating that curiosity, that sense of wonder. I daydreamed a lot. I encourage people to daydream. Please include that in your everyday. And I feel like, yeah, just sense of wonder, like it sparks creativity. There's so much happening now in life that just blocks us from being creative. And I feel like that's a form of rest that we don't allow ourselves to have. So for me, it was literally school, and I didn't spend a lot of time in nature growing up, like nature, and it's also how we define nature in the outdoors, but also figuring out that it was doing enough for me that I know I can like build on it over time. So when I got to college, I ended up doing an internship that focused on bird research. And I knew nothing about birds and like, you know, field research, any of that stuff, but I did love the outdoors. I did love nature. It was just a peaceful, calming place to be, especially being an introvert because I didn't want to deal with people. But it gave me an opportunity to really like hone in on something in the natural world, which was birds, and that they speak a different language. They're beautiful. There's tons of different species. There's, you know, survival instincts, their behaviors, all of these different layers. And it really helped me think about the differences and the similarities of how wildlife and animals communicate and how we communicate with each other as humans, and like the similarities of that. And just feeling more connected. Like nature taught me how to be more connected to people, which is weird, but like it told me not to give up on people. It just showed me how to not give up on people, because I was ready to just be like, you know, I just can't. But once I realized like, oh, I have this whole other way to think about how I can build relationships with people, then everything else opened up. And now, because I have such an excitement for nature and the outdoors, and it's just this enthusiasm, other people see and witness that and feed off of that energy, and they want more of it too. So I think it's just this like reciprocated energy of excitement, thrill, wisdom that just keeps like permeating through things. Sorry, I don't know if that made sense, but
Yeah, it's like that energy for today's discussion. I like we could go on for a few more hours.
yes.
That question that came out around teachers' access to outdoors. I've got colleagues in Idaho that have a project with the elementary school, and they have a outside storyboard walk project that they have done, and it's just a simple way to connect to the outdoors. And I'm inspired, I'm energized, I'm passionate about this movement and promoting nature-based interventions in our practice and with our youth and families. And I think it's about, creating that vision of the future that we all want and we can collectively make happen. And that's a quote by Richard Louv. So
I see there's a second part to that. Did I have a mentor? Or was nature accessible? It wasn't. I was in inner city Cleveland, just urban concrete everywhere. But I was my own mentor. My teacher, I had my teacher, my kindergarten teacher as my mentor, but she didn't know what I was going through. So it wasn't really like a nature mentor. It was just more of like, this person is helping me like as a human being without knowing it, get through my trauma, or at least just detach myself from what I was going through. But eventually I had people show up in my life that became more of my nature mentors.
I think healing happens in relationships, and what better place than to have that happen outdoors than possible.
Great. We're a little over the hour, but and thanks so much, Nicole and Sonny, for those last thoughts. I just wanted to give Renee and Kari an opportunity if you had one last thought to share before we close. Not to put you on the spot or anything.
No, as you said, Sonny, like I feel like we could talk for hours. Like I have a million different things I'd like to say. I'll just say thank you though to everybody. I really enjoyed it, and it's so fun to see all the stuff in the chat, all the people that are thinking about this and have lots of different ideas and questions and sharing information with each other. I saw that there was an OT there. I'm really interested in people who are doing OT outside. We've got somebody here in Minneapolis. It feels like there's a movement growing to bring this more into education and to my field, in therapy, and lots of like trying to connect with nature as a partner for the work that we are all doing, not just for individuals, but for the community, and have it circle back, like you said, Renee, like circle back, into actually caring for the earth. That's what benefits all of us in the end. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Yay, that was beautiful. I'll also be quick. We started to touch onto it, and it just shows how juicy this is and how passionate we are. But yeah, just how to move beyond self into like community healing and community care, and how the two can coexist and happen simultaneously, and just like allowing for both ands in our lives and that way of thinking. And let's see, there was one other thing, but I can't think of it at the moment. So I will also just say thank you so much for your attention and time and questions and for participating. I'm really fired up, so I'm gonna have to go for like a jog after this or something.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nicole and Sonny, Renee, and Kari. This was amazing. One tool that I wrote down that I'm going to start using right away with my children is letting go of expectations and outcomes, which is an entirely different tool that I thought that I would walk away from after having this conversation. So that in itself is amazing. I'll also note that we'll comb through the chat for feedback and suggestions for other topics for future webinars and resources. And you can all stay tuned for our next Families Together and Nature event that will be in May. We're going to be talking about family times outdoors. So that conversation will include topics like barriers and solutions, benefits and activities, including the Vitamin N Challenge, which will kick off in July. I also want to note that we do have a Families Together and Nature group on the Trailhead, which is our free online community. So if you want to keep the conversation going, it's the place to share resources, ideas, questions, and to cheer each other on as we continue in our work, our personal goals, and continuing our work in the Children in Nature movement. And you could also visit our website where we have a lot of resources too. So like I said, a recording will be sent to all registered members in about 2 weeks. It'll also be available on our website at that time. And thank you again to all of our presenters and everyone that joined us for the event today.